everybody. We are a bunch of different therapists from Associates in Pediatric Therapy next door to you guys. So I will let everybody go through the line and introduce themselves, starting with Miss Kristen.
Yeah, I'm Kristen. I'm an OT. I'm Meredith. I'm an occupational therapist as well.
I'm Sam. I'm a speech language pathologist.
I'm Lindsay. I'm an OT, and I also do aquatic therapy in your all's pool a couple days a week.
And I'm Macaulay. I'm an occupational therapist and the manager.
Yep. Okay, so this is a general presentation to give you guys some strategies to use specifically during camp in the summer, help you out with some kiddos, some concerns that you guys have brought up. So our overview is going to be these sections. So we're starting with what is autism? What does that mean? What does that look like? Because it's got a lot of different facets to it. Talking about what elopement is and what we can do about it. Calming strategies specifically for transitioning between things, communication breakdowns, and then time for some scenarios and some questions and all that jazz to make it functional for you guys. So, starting out, what is autism? This is the official definition that you will find around. So, autism spectrum disorder is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. It is a spectrum. You're going to see different skill sets across all of your kids in all of these areas. No two kids with autism are the same, which I'm sure any of you all who have worked with anybody with autism know. So, some terms to know throughout this presentation and as we specifically talk about autism are going to be what regulation is. So regulation is when a child's emotional state and behavior match the environment they're in. That doesn't always mean that they're calm, right? If we're doing something super exciting and your kid is sitting there quietly and not moving, they're not regulated for the task that they need to be doing. So there's a misconception of that, of like, oh, they're regulated, which means they're like cool, calm, collected all the time. Not the same thing. A meltdown is going to be defined as a loss of control, usually as a result of sensory or emotional overwhelm. It's not a tantrum. They are two very different things. Meltdowns are not within kids' control, and that's something very important to remember when they're happening. Because sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on with this kiddo? How can I, where is this coming from? Are they doing this to get out of something? If it's a meltdown, they have no control whatsoever over what's going on. Transitions are known as changes regarding moving from place to place or activity to activity, which you guys do all day, every day at camp, all the time. So you have transitions all day long. And last is elopement, which is when a child runs or wanders away from a secure location without regard for their safety or any instructions, things like that. So your kiddos that just, at the drop of a hat, sprint across the gym, sprint away from what you're doing, those are your elopers. All right, so when we talk about autism, three big components that you're gonna see. Communication differences, sensory needs, and behavioral differences, okay? For communication, it is always impacted with a kiddo with an autism diagnosis, even if you don't think that it is. They can have a full conversation with you, and they might not be fully understanding everything that you're saying to them, and your kiddos that can't have a conversation with you also are probably understanding a lot of what you're saying, right? It's very hard to judge that either way. We always want to presume competence that a kiddo understands, but also understand that maybe they don't, and we need to accommodate in that way. For sensory needs, you're going to have kids that are different across the way. You're going to have some kids that love squeezes, love jumping, love all of these things, and other kids that is terrifying too. Every system is different. It's a case-by-case basis as you go. And then last, for behavioral difficulties are a part of autism. You're going to see it. Most of the time, though, it's important to remember that it is a result of something else. They're not being bad. They're not being defiant. There is an underlying cause to why they are acting the way that they're acting. 9 times out of 10, it's a communication breakdown or it's a sensory overwhelm. So they don't understand what you're asking, or they don't think you understand what they need, all these pieces, or I'm overwhelmed, it's too loud, there's too much going on, I can't communicate that to you, so therefore I'm going to act in a way that I think will work, which is often lashing out. So, got all those pieces. And this is just a very important note and a quote that we like to use as well when we're talking about it. If you've met one autistic individual, you've met one autistic individual. You are going to have different needs, different skill abilities, different behaviors, different things for every single kiddo that comes through your door, neurotypical or neurodivergent. But especially with autism, we like to say, they're autistic, they need hugs, or they need this, or they need it quiet. It's not always the same across. So that comes into you guys building rapport with your kids, figuring out what they need, and we're going to give you some strategies that can help across the border to try with different kiddos.
Okay, elopement. So oftentimes we don't know why kids elope. They could elope because they hear something, they see something, they don't like what you're doing. Like there's never one size fits all on why they elope. So this just shows like, we don't know. It could be any of these reasons or none of these, and we don't know why. So what we do, so we recommend always safety first. If the child is going to put themselves in danger, you intervene. Sometimes it has to be physical, you know, like if they're going to run into like a gymnastics person or cheerleader who's tumbling, like grab them. Don't let them like run into them because they're gonna hurt that person and themselves. Be proactive, so keep doors closed. Anything like the pool area, you all do a good job of keeping it closed. Summers, when you all go outside, make sure that those are closed if anybody has a tendency to elope. Oftentimes you don't know if they have a tendency to elope until they do elope though. So physical barriers, so use gates, which you all do a great job of, use those all over. And then try and redirect them if you can, if you're able to. Oftentimes, like if like Lindsay's eloping, I'm just like, hey, let's go this way, you know, just kind of like the whole grab their arm and turn them the other way. And then make it fun, so make it a game, like red light, green light, duck, duck, goose, anything that can get their attention back towards you. Calming.
All right, so some calming strategies. Kind of going along like what Lindsay said, these are merely strategies, and we understand that you guys are not necessarily like medical professionals, but like, so anything that we might recommend, say it's like a hug, for example, every kiddo is going to tolerate that in a different way. So always have that. I think like maybe a big takeaway is having an open mind into even just like these strategies and just like generalizations, because they're just that, like, unless they're seeing somebody specific. And that might be really helpful information for you all to know also ahead of time. Calming strategies are not always going to work on the first try, you know, and especially like if you're feeling very overwhelmed and frustrated yourself, it is unlikely that child's going to calm down with you. So just some like little nuggets, but so working just like generally, how do we like kind of this awesome environment, how do we keep it like as calm as possible? So some things that like ideas that we had were high arousal activities that you guys generally participate in should also like be accompanied with like lower arousal and connection. So for every kiddo that's high, we need to bring them down, and then we need them to connect to you. So with like the big and loud and fast activities, you know, you've got your free play where like we've seen with camps where you're doing just like lots of running, jumping, climbing. So, which is great. So to start that transition, you've got like, you know, your boom box up, maybe start to lower down that music a little bit. So it's like, oh, I'm noticing that the kids notice like, oh, there's a little change. You might hop on your microphone and say like, okay, we turned the music down. We're going to start to slow our body down. We're going to start to settle down, and still give them though some time to adjust to that change. Sometimes like just turning off the music or saying like, hey, we're all done, whatever it might be, or even a timer, like it's just too quick of a transition, especially for the amount of kids that you guys have. Like we work one-on-one and it's still hard, you know? So just thinking broad too with like this big group. So starting your transition by maybe lowering the music volume, cueing the kids to slow down, and then help the kids connect with their body. Like, okay, the music has turned down, so instead of running, we're going to play with our walking feet instead while they're still in this open space. So they can be like, oh, okay, now I'm slowing down. Connecting with their body or in a fun way, melting to the floor, taking a big dragon breath to slow their bodies down. Walking around like, okay, our music is off. I want everyone to walk and give two friends a high five and then sit down, or come line up on, you know, a square, wherever you guys might have. Those are just good ways to like slowly move into what you guys need to transition to, which is like maybe lunch or another activity. Let's see who can tiptoe the quietest to the door. Now let's line up and go get lunch. Kids like challenges, you know, obviously we don't want to be like, who's going to be the winner, but like, hey, let's see if everyone can be super quiet. and go that way. How do I?
Can I just interject?
Yes.
It reminds me, I think a lot of our preschool classes do this innately. With our little guys are constantly doing a transition from one circuit to the next. It doesn't always translate into our rep, and definitely not in camps. So that's, I think, and when you have a behavioral class with a lot of kids that are high energy, and this is not people that are living with autism, these are just kids that are just kind of wound that way. It's those transitions that help you get from one to one, and so you don't have chaos, and then building and amping up their energy the entire time.
Yeah.
So remembering kind of the preschool approach can be very effective with
Yeah.
school-age kids. Even though it seems silly, all those ideas that you just gave are all great ideas to bring that level down. So I think kind of preschool mindset.
Yeah, and I do think a great point that you made too is kids are kids, and this is like literally the coolest place to them. And so, like, we're running, we're jumping with friends, we're like, oh my gosh, this is so great. And their emotions are up here, and they're going to stay there. And that sensory is also going to go up higher too. And so, it's like, whenever one raises, the opposite is gonna, or even like if they're running and playing, all of a sudden it's like they didn't like that song, they're like, they're covering in their ears. Emotionally, they're gonna shift too. And so it's hard to bring them all down. And so, like you're saying, like just systematically, just checking those little boxes innately of like, okay, we've turned the music down. We've told them, we've prompted them to lower their body a little bit. I'm showing them that I'm calmer too. Like I'm whispering like, okay, let's tiptoe, maybe going around and like, to a few kids in the group and telling them to tiptoe. So, but yeah, just thinking like those emotions go up because it's so great that those sensory responses are naturally going to raise too. I understand you guys have like a little sensory room that you're trying to utilize. So some ideas for your sensory room, just in general, we really use sensory as a means of just like calming and not necessarily like play. Like, especially your room, we don't want it to be like, we're going to go play in here instead. Let's just go and let's see if we can calm our body. This would be for those kids that's like, we are in a meltdown. We are not in control of our body. You're not sure what those trigger points are, that you're going to take them then to this room. And like the biggest thing too being that like, it is not punishment. Sensory is not punishment. Going to a quiet spot is not punishment. And they like may feel that at first. That's common. Like I would be like, I don't want to go to a room by myself. And it's like, hey, we're good. We're not going to a room because you're in trouble. I think always making sure that's like communicated is a big piece. Like, because if they perceive threat, then like you're not going to make any headway emotionally or with like that sensory regulation too. But a sensory room is to assist with calming and letting out any emotions that they need to in a safe manner. There's many times where we might just have to sit and let them yell. Like, there's nothing wrong with that as long as they're safe, you're safe, and they're not harming anything around them. It's not another play area. We encourage low stimulation, engagement with the room and the environment. So that means like, not going into the room and being like, okay, let's turn that music back up and let's keep playing. It's like, no, let's sit and let's like just draw, and that might just be like sitting next to that kiddo for a little bit and not even talking to them. Using positive language, so the way we speak about the sensory room matters as a tool, not punishment. And then individualizing it. Each kiddo is going to use that equipment in there differently. One kiddo may need to go in and just tear paper. Maybe they're really angry. Let them tear it. Let them, roll it into a ball and make a basketball hoop with it or something. Like with your arms, like, oh, can you get it in? And that might help with transitions and also when they need some regulation. These are just some great tools to help with some calming, mentioning that like low stimulation environment, low lighting. So being able to like turn the lights off and have just like things on the wall. So whether it's like a fish tank or like a, stars on the ceiling, a little light projector, or even like a small lamp that's like a yellow shade, not bright. Brightness is going to stimulate us. Things that they can play with their hands, especially that are like quite resistive. Those are often like a lot of kids probably come with them in their little bags. Deep pressure can be very helpful with hugs and squeezes. Also even just a weighted blanket. They might just need to lay down. Hey, let's give you a little blanket. Let's give you a little squeeze and snuggle up in there. Music, instrumental music's great, but also just like white noise. So having even a sound machine with some waves crashing or some rain, or even for like the younger kids, like nursery nursery rhymes, just like the instruments and their specific like tone and rhythm can just like help regulate a child, just like help bring them back to like a baseline. Breathing, of course, like deep breaths are great. They are not for everyone, but I do find that like if we can regulate our breath and how we are even speaking to the kid, it is better, it's easier for them to come down and connect with their breath too. And just connecting with them, like, that was a really rough time, but hey, I think we can go back out there. We can try it again, you know, as long as they're not feeling like, oh gosh, she hates me for what I just did. You're going to be a little bit more successful. Is this still mine? Yeah, okay. And then just some ideas for connecting with kids would be like, you know, it's going to depend if they're like, you know, upset and mad and angry with you. You're probably not going to run in and give them a hug. You know, they're probably absolutely going to want to hit you or kick you. And that's not the goal there. So recognizing that like they're going to need their space, and maybe it's just that you're going to have to sit kind of near them or far from them, roll them a ball, and maybe they'll roll it back to you, and slowly kind of ease your way in there, especially if you're trying to make that transition. Kiddos who are sad, maybe they're more likely to want to hug. Maybe they're the ones that are more likely to want to snuggle up with you. So the pressure can vary. It depends. And then that co-regulation piece, the child needs to feel that like you're a safe person. So that goes back to the like, if you're really frustrated and upset, maybe tag somebody in, because those are also innate things. Trust me, like we all get frustrated. Like it happens, and that is okay. But being able to have that awareness of like, this is like really tough for me. I'm gonna go see if Macaulay can just handle this for me, and I'm gonna step out real quick. Those are okay things too, because the kiddos need us. And then back to that connection piece. Once the child appears, to have calmed down, connect with them through play, and slowly try and make that transition back to whatever it was.
All right, transitions. So we know you all do a lot of different activities at camp, which is great. We love it. But for these kiddos with behaviors, transitioning is often difficult because they don't want to stop what they're doing. They don't, even though like the next thing is go swimming, like they're not done jumping. So we wanted to give you all a few strategies. So prep is key. The more you do beforehand, the easier hopefully it will be. So I did make you all, which I only made one, but I can absolutely make two for both locations, but you all can also make your own. So visual schedules, we use these all the time. This one is just straight across plain. This one is the one that I use the most. So it's first you get to jump, then then we have lunch and a movie, and then I don't know, get your backpack and then go to the car. So after you finish jumping, you move it to all done. And then, okay, the next thing is lunch. After lunch, you move it, which you all can make these for the whole class, or I don't know if it's a class camp, the whole camp group, instead of just individualizing them for one child. But I did make some, and they're not the best visuals, but I tried my best. But also, for some of the kids that are more literal, taking pictures of what you have might be more beneficial than, like, my water day is like a random slip and slide thing that probably doesn't look anything like what yours looks like.
It's pretty accurate.
Okay, well, all right. Okay. Okay, well, never mind. But trampoline doesn't look like yours, but, you know, just other stuff that you all do. I just did the basketball for the basketball court. But, so, visual schedules, you all can pass these around if you want. And then the other thing we use a lot is timers. So, if you're interested, there is a free app if you all want to get your phone out, and I can tell you it. It's the one that we use all the time. And I'll show you how it works. So you pick a picture, and then after you set the time, it reveals the picture, and it makes the noise. So if you go to your app store, it's called Visual Countdown Timer, and it's the one with the rubber duck. And it's free, completely free. They've recently added a whole lot more pictures So you don't have to, you have the opportunity to buy it. I don't buy it. It does go to an app right after an ad right after the time is up, but it's got all these fun new characters. There's like jellyfish and a unicorn now, and I don't know who these people are, but skateboard and these cartoon characters, I don't know. But it makes it more fun, and so we do that a lot. And it's a visual for them to see, like, it's getting red, like we're getting close to the time where I need to transition. And then along with that, so reminders like tell them we have 10 more minutes of this, then tell them we have 5 more minutes until we need to move, and then, 1 more minute. Just continuously giving them those prompts. And then follow through. So when the timer goes off and they say 1 more minute, don't give them 1 more minute. Just stick firm as you can, as best you can. And make it fun. Like, do you want to march to lunch or do you want to skip to lunch? Don't give them the choice of like, are you ready yet? Because that's not a choice. Like, they have to move. So like, how are we going to move? Are we going to jump or are we going to march? And the speech therapist is now going to talk on communication.
Hi. I'll come over here. Okay, so kind of like what we've been saying, when we've been going over this connection piece, right? And so how we communicate with our kids is so key when we're trying to connect with them, so that they're understanding us and we are understanding them. Okay, so this is called a core board, and I am talking about kids who either they don't have great expressive language, maybe they're autistic and non-speaking, or like they just don't have a way to clearly, they don't have the vocabulary, right, to either understand or tell you what they want or need, and they can't understand what you want and need from them, right? So these are boards that have they're supposed to have the most flexible and frequently used vocabulary, and you can sort of change this for each setting, right? So here, instead of some of these, you could have like trampoline, or you could have like instead of like get, you could have jump, right? Stuff that applies to you guys, right? And then this is something that you might see a child who has like a device, right, with an app that has something like this on it, or you guys, I think, is a great resource, can have like a laminated, what we call a low-tech version of this, where you can offer it to a child who maybe they're having a meltdown and they can't tell you what they need. Sometimes a visual really, really helps in those moments to give them a choice, right? In when they're having those big emotional moments, right? Do we need to jump, yes or no? Do we need to go to the sensory room, yes or no? What do we need, right? So these boards can help in a lot of different ways. Oh, I didn't laminate it. I will bring that to you guys. I did make one just like with some general vocabulary that you guys could use here, and I'm so sorry I forgot to laminate it. But I will bring that, and I'll have a couple of copies for it. But oh, okay, yeah, I can. I don't. It's like in my clipboard. So I'm happy to email that. And you can obviously, like, even on that behavior chart, right? Like where we just have like the pictures lined up, even like with all the pictures on it, like you can offer them that of like, buddy, what do you need, right? Like, what are you wanting from me in this moment? Okay, so communication strategies, right? When you feel like you're not being understood or you're not understanding the child, right? We just talked about using visuals. Lindsay said presuming competence. This is something that I, like speech therapists, talk a lot about. Even if we don't understand what the child wants, we need to assume that the child does know what they want and that they are capable of successfully asking for that. So like even if there is a communication breakdown, they know what they want. And so we need to adjust the way that we communicate, right? And so in that connection piece, right, there's a lot of different ways that we can adjust the way we communicate to sort of meet our kids where we're at. And kind of like Kristen was saying, like changing our tone, right? We need to be modeling the kind of communication that we want from our kids. So if they're in a really, really elevated state, right, we need to be having that calm, collected. We need to show them that we are regulated, right? And that this is the level that we also want them to be on. Regulation before expectation. So before you can ask a child, especially if they have a lot of sensory needs or they have communication difficulties, right? we need to get them to a regulated state before we can expect them to successfully communicate, right? And that's kind of where these other tools like visuals and things come in, right? Because if they're really, really upset, right? And I think, you know, we've all been through this, right? Where we're so upset that it's like, I can't even talk right now. Like, I'm so mad or confused or sad or whatever, right? We all feel that way. And of course, especially for a lot of our kiddos who have those big, big feelings, right? They're going to get to that place a lot faster. So we need to bring them down before we can ask them, you know, more about what they need. Being a detective, so especially with a lot of our autistic kiddos, they process language differently and they express themselves differently. They might just repeat what you say back to them, right? And like if anyone knows an autistic child who does that, that's very, very common. And so or they might say like a phrase that you've heard like from a TV show or a song, right? Usually those things mean something very specific to them, right? Sometimes they're saying it as a self-calming or because they think it's funny or fun. Sometimes they are trying to tell you something very specific and they associate it with that phrase or song or word or whatever, right? And so that is a great time to ask parents of, hey, he was saying this over and over again. What is this? Does it mean something specific? Do you know? Because sometimes parents will come to you and say like, oh, that's his way of asking for, you know, this, that, or the other, right? So sometimes understanding, and again, this kind of connects with that presuming competence of like, even if they're using a unique way to ask for it, they do know what they want. And it's important for us as the adults to figure that out about them and help meet that way so that they can be successful in communicating, which goes really well into validating all communication attempts, right? So saying that like, you hear them, you understand them, even if what they're asking for isn't available to them or isn't a choice, right? If they're asking for it, sometimes like for kids who have had trouble communicating for so long, they assume at default that you just don't know what they're asking for, right? And so then they go to that big behavioral response, so, oh, maybe I need to show them, right? Or they need to know how upset I am because I can't tell them, right? And so sometimes the words, I hear you, go such a long way, right? Of just like, and it's in that moment of connection of like, I see that, I hear that you're very angry. I see that you really want to do this. I understand. And then come back and be like, but these are our choices, right? Just letting them know that they are heard, that they are understood, because feeling, and I mean, we experience this as adults too, not feeling heard and not feeling understood is a big point of frustration for everybody, right? And especially for those kiddos who have their big, big feelings to go along with it. Okay.
Hi. When I initially said I could help with this, they kind of took over and did the whole presentation. I think they feel sorry for me, so they gave me the last little section here, which is just scenarios and snacks. So let's do that then together. Okay, so I kind of want this to be a little bit back and forth. So based off of like what you've heard already, if you have anything that you think you can try to answer this, if not, we'll help you. But so kind of like the first like hang up we might have is, okay, I've used the strategies and they still don't want to transition. So what kind of transitional strategies do you think you guys can actually implement in like a camp scenario? Like, was the lowering of the temperature, you liked the visuals? Yeah. Oh, is this working? Calm down song. Yeah, those are great. So like in a group setting, getting everybody kind of on board. And so say you still have a straggler who you've done everything and they still don't want to transition. Do you have the ability to have one individual stay with that kiddo and help them transition more slowly, or are they going to have to come?
Sometimes we have an additional person. It just depends on like who is signed up for camp that day.
Yeah.
Where we may have an additional, like if I see a kiddo that I know struggles,
Yeah.
then I will say, okay, I'm gonna have one additional staff member knowing.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But it's not always that way.
You can't always do that.
I think a common, once we've already misstepped and perhaps we did not calm them, we did not help them transition, and now they've become a little irate and physical.
Yeah.
Where do you go from there?
Yeah, that's our next question. Oh yeah, it's coming up. So yeah, so it again, like keeping everybody safe. So do they get aggressive towards like the staffers or
Usually,
Yeah.
usually
yeah,
the domino effect is usually they've been aggressive with someone that they were playing with because
Sure.
they didn't get what they wanted out of the game, or and then the counselor goes to intervene to make sure the other kid stays safe. And of course, by doing so, the counselor's already a little aggressive because they're trying to stop the aggressive behavior, and then it domino effects very quickly.
Yeah.
And that's hard with as big of groups of kids as you guys have. And so these strategies are supposed to be general for everybody. Obviously, we've talked a lot about autism and all those things. These are strategies that should work for the majority of your children, right? All kids need to be calmed. All kids need to be doing those things. And all kids are going to have behavioral responses like that, right? Doesn't mean that a kid has a diagnosis when they're like, I didn't like that you beat me in Uno. Wow, right? Not great. We don't love that. But as counselors, being on alert and looking for those pieces where they start to really come up. And we're hoping too that in using this and having those calming pieces worked in through the day, right, where it's like we had a calm, good transition, we're trying to keep the chaos to a minimum because behavior thrives on chaos, right? Because chaotic's happening, this kid's running this way, that kid's running that way, my counselor's not gonna see me if I trip my friend, right? All of these things. So we're looking into it and trying to say, like, can you anticipate when those things are going to happen? The better you know your kids. Are you guys with the same kids every day, or is it like you have different groups every time?
It just depends.
Okay, that's okay.
We
But
always have a core person.
okay,
Someone that works basically like full time.
Okay.
At the location. So someone that works full time, and then they may have different helpers throughout the day.
okay. And so, you know, if you guys establish a system of like, hey, little Bobby loses his ever-loving mind when he loses Uno, maybe we shouldn't play Uno with Bobby. Maybe we should do a game that's just, it's not competitive, or we can work together on something different, right? Tailoring it individually to those kiddos and knowing like, hey, and giving your coworkers the heads up, like, hey, you got Bobby in your class today. Put Uno in the back. Don't even bring it out. It's not going to go well, right? And then working on those things as you go.
Yeah, and I think utilizing the sensory room too. So if you can, in the middle of those big meltdowns, like they talked about meltdowns, you lose the ability to reason after a certain point, and it's not the time to have a constructive conversation about what happened until the child is calm. So, you know, removing the child from the situation if you can, even if it's just in the back corner, dim the lights, like pop some music on your phone that's calming, trying to support them and keep the people around them safe. And I know it's hard, like if you're being targeted, you may have to step back and do some corralling to keep them in an area. You guys got a lot of padded areas too, like if they need to run and plop, like if they need to do some runs and, you know, hard crashes on the trampoline 3 times, and then you can maybe get them to the next spot. But yeah, every kid is different, and hopefully you can learn little things for each kid. Like this one strategy really helped Timmy, playing calming music. Having bubbles to blow for Susie was supportive. Like I would think that, you know, you can maybe learn about that, your campers in that way.
Do you all have like safe tactics for when a kid does get physical though? Because we do have that, like where they're hurting themselves.
There are specific training. So we have to be trained in order, so we don't.
Did you? Oh, I didn't know if you wanted to.
No, I was just gonna say like, yeah, there are specific things like trainings I think that you can do for that, but like we don't even use any of them.
The initial is going to be creating physical space as much as you can, just trying to disengage. As like the closer you are to them, the more likely you are that they're going to be aggressive towards you if you're within space. So if you can create that physical redirect with whatever it is, redirect that anger to something that they can throw, that they can.
Yes.
do.
In that.
You can't hit me, but you can punch this beanbag. I mean, you can't stomp on my foot, but you can jump on the trampoline. Like they just don't even know what's an option.
Right, and so I think the power of redirection is so important here, and also not just saying, hey, don't do that, but giving them clear and specific instructions about what is appropriate to do, right, or what you need them to be doing in that moment. Hey, don't hit him. Hey, if you're unhappy, like walk away, right, or like jump in the foam pit. You know what I mean? Like giving them something else to do because they are externalizing an emotion, and that needs to go somewhere for them, right? So just telling them to hold back isn't.
I think some of our instructors, because they work with a wide array of kids, maybe knee-jerk to punitive and not wanting to reward bad behavior. So if we had a kid that was just being a brat, and they weren't transitioning, and this isn't someone that has emotional behavior issues, the last thing we would do, like, let's go to the trampoline and jump a little bit till you calm down and decide that, but realizing that this is not the same situation with kids that are on a more behavioral emotional spectrum, and that's not really, you're just trying to do yourself a favor so they don't continue to escalate.
Right.
And
Being really clear of like first transition, and like kids love to know what's coming next. So if you're having a hard transition, first we got to get to whatever, then reminding them what's coming. First, come with me, then you have your preferred activity or something they can look forward to doing after.
Right, and reframing it to keep, like, kind of like we said, like, keep language positive, right? Like, it's not that we're all done playing here, it's we're so excited to go swim, right? You know, like telling them the positive thing that they need to be so excited for coming next, instead of just being like, we're stopping the fun thing right now. I've found that can be helpful as
And
well.
those kiddos that don't have diagnoses, that just have behavioral difficulties and all of that stuff, there is still an underlying piece to their behavior. They are doing it for a reason. 99% of the time, it's not just to be difficult. They're frustrated that they lost a game. They're mad that their friend did this. They missed their mom. They didn't eat the rest of their lunch. They're hungry. They're hangry. They're taking it out on everybody, right? There's almost always a reason, and that's where that detective piece comes in. Give grace as much as you can and try to get underneath it to figure out where it's coming from, and you will have more success in working on those pieces than trying to redirect the behavior after it happens.
Right. And asking caregivers too if they've got strategies. Like, hey, having parents kind of know too that you're struggling with this. What works at home?
What's up, Sarah?
That was going to be my question, was how to deal with caretakers that don't understand how to regulate themselves, and they see that I'm just playing with their kids when really I'm keeping them regulated and calm in a lesson.
That is a hard one.
Tell them just that. Like, I mean, your goal's not to parent that child, you know, ultimately. So I'm playing right now is what is helping your kiddo transition, or is like what calmed him down, and I'm okay with that, and that's good. The power of education, you know, you don't know until you know, and just like there's always so many shifts, and it's hard to keep up. And I'm sure it's like even just like taking into account some of this information. I mean, like this is like years in the making of like how we now understand behavior and sensory. And like my parents would be like, I am not gonna give you a hug when you're upset. Are you serious? You know what I mean? But it's just generational and it's different. And so those parents they may choose not to have that viewpoint, and they may choose, or they may just not know. So just by tenderly explaining to them and educating them, I mean, at the end of the day, if it's a positive impact for you and that kiddo, that's a win, you know? And that's what you need here are the wins. I mean, outside these doors, it could be different, you know? So hopefully that answers that.
I have a question, circling back on that aggressive behavior. What, I know you said, like, if it's getting aggressive, to back away. What if they're physically hurting themselves? Because I've run into that before, and it's like,
They're like banging their
yes,
head,
like hitting
on the
on
ground.
something that could seriously hurt them at that point.
So we see that a lot. So I just had a kiddo just now today, but if you can, like, move them to a soft, like, again, like on the mats, on the trampoline, even like if you can corral them to a soft area, because you want to try to protect the head. Like that's no good. I mean, I just could try to even slide a hand under. If they let you squeeze their head, like sometimes that can be enough with the head banging. But
Y'all have a couple of yoga balls too.
yeah, like like rolling or on their head.
Just letting them use that to hit their head instead of the floor.
Yeah. Giving them
Or the foam blocks. Yeah, the foam.
Yeah.
You just slide a block under there or something.
just something, and it's
They want that input.
yeah, because that pain response, like for a moment, takes them out of whatever else they're feeling. So it's so hard because they're doing it. When you do a behavior enough, it's a cause and effect. Like that behavior met their need, and they're going to keep doing it. But there's other things that can help. So that's their own. It's a coping strategy, and that's all they got. And it's not an efficient one, and we want to try to help them find others. And that might be an OT, like if they're in services, like we may have an idea for them. But for the head banging, trying to redirect to either deep pressure, protect the head if you can, even like clapping or like hitting, smacking, they're like clapping, like they need they're looking for like a big input.
I like water too.
Oh.
Ice, Sam, go get me a cup of ice, like let's give that, like just shock their system in a different way. Temperature is a big deal. Like you're upset, chances are they're going to be hot and sweaty, and then it's like, oh my gosh, now I'm hot and I'm sweaty and I'm like all itchy, and they're just like running through these things. And so the power of water, let's go to the bathroom and wash your hands. Let's go get a ice cold drink of water. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Exactly. Or a snack, just like something even, to just like take their mind off of like they're hitting their head because that's like their innate response. But like, hey, here's a quick like alternative. And those might be things that you have readily available too. They always come with a lunch or they always come with a water bottle. But that's, another idea.
That's not the teaching moment. That's just we're keeping you
That's the
safe,
supporting
getting you
moment.
ready, and then maybe 30 minutes later we can be like, wow, we were really frustrated. And that depends on that kiddo's communication and if you can have that back and forth conversation and reasoning, right? And be like, next time that happens, what could we do? Could you come talk to me? Could you try to walk away? Giving them actionable strategies other than that.
Any other questions? I feel like we've gone through all
Yes,
this
pretty
next.
much.
Yeah.
That's been great. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
And we can send this PowerPoint over to you guys to have. Yeah, we'll have this and then some visuals and all that stuff.
Thank you guys for coming.
And helping all the kiddos.